Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Premier Chelsea, your source for all things Premier League, but starting with Chelsea first. Coming to you on your speakers and headsets. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm one of your hosts, Jackie. I'm here in Houston, and I'm with my two good friends, Rahul and Alex. Guys, I missed one, but it was apparently a very hot one. I got to listen to bits and pieces of it, and I'm excited to get back on here.
Welcome back. It's good to have you, and you definitely missed a hot one, and hopefully Alex and I have calmed down a little bit since last week. But that goal right at the end, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, from Kai Havertz and Sam Kerr, has put me in a good mood.
Yeah, look, I think it needed to be a hot one. I think your emotions for both of you guys were warranted. Alex had some colorful things to say. Alex, I'll come and start with you first. Any update this week on Chelsea overall, Roman Abramovich, what's going on in that sphere over there?
It's been the usual sort of media merry-go-round with different names being reported, a bunch of billionaires supposedly interested. We saw stories just recently about a Saudi media group supposedly expressing interest. We've also seen stories about Nick Candy, a British billionaire, supposedly, who is interested. And we've still got theoretically reports of American owners forming a consortium and interested. So luckily, I think this is a situation where Chelsea, or perhaps the UK government, whoever ends up making the final call, is going to have several options to pick from. So hopefully it's a good one. And until then, we will just keep doing our thing, annoying the media, annoying the rival fans, and winning games.
Nicely said, Rahul. Before we jump into the Newcastle game, I'll bring it back to you. Any preference, any news, any things you want to share with us on the front of the change of ownership that might be coming down the pipeline?
I do have some preferences at the expense of being going too deep into the politics and some of the things Alex and I covered in the last episode. I think whoever it is, hopefully it's the person or group or consortium or whoever it ends up being, isn't someone that will bring us back into the situation that we're currently in. Not that we 20 years ago would have thought we'd be in this situation, so you never know what happens. But hopefully the government, Roman Abramovich, if he has a say, and Chelsea as a club, hopefully can pick the right owner so that we can all move on from this and get back to what really matters is the football.
Indeed, that's what really matters. And we picked up against another rich club in Newcastle who also have questionable owners. And so that's all an interesting situation going on. But neither here nor there. It's a game that we have to play. Alex, I'll come to you if you want to take us through the starting 11.
Yeah, so for the Newcastle game, we lined up with Mendy in goal, as is, I suppose, our usual. He's always quite consistent, and yet again, we saw him prove his worth. We had Chalobah, Christensen, Rudiger, and Malang Sarr bringing up the back line, and then N'Golo Kante and Mason Mount and Jorginho all coming in midfield, with Hakim Ziyech and Kai Havertz and Timo Werner as our attackers. So maybe not the usual formation you might expect, but I know a lot of Chelsea fans have been saying a sort of, I guess, more of a 4-3-3 is not a bad idea necessarily against some of these teams who are going to sit back a little more against Chelsea. And I think, as we've seen, sometimes it is an advantage to not be having that five at the back, even if those wing backs are attacking, because in, unfortunately, the absence of Reece James with his latest little knock, we were out both of our world-class wing backs yet again. But the job did get done, so you've got to say credit to Tuchel for his lineup and his tweaks.
Yeah, the job does get done. Rahul, I'll come to you for a minute. A couple of names that I'll point out here. Mason Mount playing a little bit deeper this time. I think we talked about that with Stamford Chidge a couple of episodes ago, and he said long-term that's a really good opportunity for Mason to play a little bit deeper and control the game. So nice to see him in that position. And then new wingers partnering Kai Havertz this time, and Hakim Ziyech coming back into the starting 11, and Timo Werner holding the left wing.
Yeah, I mean, when we spoke to Chidge, he did mention he sees Mount more of in number 8. Kind of similar to his dad. I mean, sorry, Frank Lampard. And it was good to see that he was fit and ready to go even in that position. And it obviously requires a little more defensive work as well as helping out in the attack, especially with Jorginho kind of being the anchor and sitting there. So it was good for that. And in terms of the wingers, Hakim Ziyech, I think Alex and I had predicted that it would be a back four in the last episode, and did say Ziyech would come in that case, which was good. Timo Werner, I was kind of a surprise because I think we were thinking Pulisic would be the better option, especially with how defensive we knew Newcastle were going to be. But I think Tuchel's managing Pulisic's minutes, which is something that's always good because we don't want to lose him for a longer period of time. And Timo did need a game. He did need a goal, but we'll get to some of the things that happened later. But I think overall a good lineup, and a back four made up of four center backs always is a little touchy, but we got there.
Yeah, look, and it's credit to Tuchel that he's got them playing out of position, and they're playing well. I mean, Malang Sarr is not a left back by trade, but I think he's played there more so than a center back this season, obviously with injury problems and everything. And he's done all right. He's done okay for someone who's not a natural left back. Alex, I'll come to you. There was a lot of talk, a lot of feedback on Twitter, Instagram about the atmosphere wasn't as excited. Maybe some might describe it as flat compared to some other games that we've had. What do you make of this? Do you think it's around some of the things going on in and around the club rather than just the football that happened?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a worry among Chelsea fans, and this has been a very tough period for the club. It's difficult to focus fully on the football when you've also got that issue hanging over your head of, well, after today, we're not going to be allowed to sell match tickets. Or when you walk up to Stamford Bridge on match day and you see the mega store closed with a sign saying, sorry, we're unable to provide service right now. So it's definitely a little demoralizing. It's a little uncertain of a time for Chelsea fans, but I think hopefully, and as Tuchel said at the end, we just need the support of the fans, because it's that much more helpful for the players and for the club when we have the fans backing us, because he and the players are going to keep going out and doing their jobs. They can't control the circumstances around them. And I think hopefully the situation is resolved soon, so we no longer have to worry about all this uncertainty hanging over our heads. But until then, we definitely do need to make sure that however many fans are allowed in the stadiums that we play in for the foreseeable future, they're giving their full voice to the team, because it's going to be a tough period, but I have faith in the team to carry on.
Yeah, it is definitely going to be a tough period. And I think Tuchel actually mentioned this, Rahul, that there's some players that might be uncertain of their future. They might be uncertain of the surrounding around the club. But more than talking about that, I want to talk about a funny little incident, and maybe you can shed some light on it. The Newcastle fans were singing about Mike Ashley, but maybe not in the way we'd expect, right?
Definitely not. And how the tables have turned, because Newcastle being the richest club, and you could say now we're one of the poorest clubs in the world. They were singing Mike Ashley is coming for you, in terms of he's going to be the one buying us, not that he's anywhere close to affording or putting up the money that's needed. But it was a little bit of banter, which was good, because then the Chelsea fans responded back with Kai Havertz is coming for you, which eventually he did. So, back and forth, which was good. I was personally a little surprised with the atmosphere. It was a little flat. I thought, given that this was going to be the first game since everything that's happened since the last Premier League home game, which was Spurs in mid-January, I thought we would be a little more pumped up, not to criticize the fans or anything, but just to voice in terms of what I was expecting. But either way, I think the fans did everything they could, given everything that's going on, to pull the team over the line.
Yeah, that's something that it's going to be difficult for the next few weeks, coming months. We'll see how that plays out. You talked about the fans talking about Kai Havertz, and he's going to give it to you. But before we get into that detail, I think in the first half, a major incident that happens, and we'll dive right into the first half. Alex, I think Kai Havertz jumps up for a header or contest a header, and he leaves a pretty strong elbow in his opponent's face. Is he lucky to be on the pitch in that part of the game?
I mean, you've seen reds given for that kind of challenge, but at the same time, you've also seen plenty of refs disregard that and say, you know what, it's a 50-50. I don't think he's particularly lucky to escape there. I think it's two players going up for a header. His opponent also had the elbow raised, just not quite as high. But I think the key is just looking both eyes clearly on the ball, no malicious intent, just a strong physical challenging for a header, which, as we know, is one of the more dangerous things that happens in the game. So definitely a tough challenge, a sore one for the opponent, but I think a yellow card is exactly the right call. And if you started giving reds for that kind of a coming together, I think very few games would end with 22 players on the pitch. So I think, a hard yellow, maybe call it an orange, but I wouldn't go red there. And I think it's good not to set a precedent of red cards for that kind of challenge.
Yeah, I think the key is that his eyes never left the ball. He never looked at his opponent, seemingly no malintent. It was purely accidental. But Rahul, we struggled to break Newcastle down in that first half. What was it down to? Was it Newcastle's good planning? Was it us just having some distractions? Can you pinpoint kind of why it was difficult?
I think it was a little bit of both. Newcastle came into this game unbeaten in, I believe, 8 or 9. So they had belief flowing through them. They obviously wanted to test themselves against the world champions, the European champions. And they were set up in a way that made it difficult for us to get in behind them, to find the spaces that we usually thrive on. And with the back five, with the midfield of 4, that's basically 9 players behind the ball, or at least 5 in terms of the defense. So it was a little tight, but we still, I think, not too many opportunities, but we still found ways to get in there. We just didn't apply the finishing touches. And I think Newcastle have to be commended for the pressing work that they did in terms of when we had the ball. They were always coming in closer to our defense, closer to Mendy, which rose the question, why don't we go long? And I guess one of the issues was with Kai Havertz, he doesn't have that physicality and the height. So I think those two things combined led to the struggles in the first half and for most of the second half. But you've got to commend Newcastle from where they were at the end of last year in terms of earlier this season to where they've come. They're building something good there.
Yeah, with the appointment of Eddie Howe plus a few key signings, which we discussed back in January, we thought it would be enough to get them to safety, and it looks like it's doing the job. And Eddie Howe is going to keep them in the Premier League for another season. Rahul, I'll stay with you before I go back to Alex, and I'm going to ask you a question. We get into that second half, and very early on, there's a trip that's performed by Chalobah, and it seems to be an interesting one. I'm not going to talk too much about the touch or not the touch, or if he dived or if he doesn't dive. What's your opinion on this?
In all honesty, it was a penalty to Newcastle. I think Chalobah got beat, came back into it in terms of being able to close him down or put in a challenge. Didn't get the first challenge right. Murphy still had the ball, put in the second challenge. Didn't get it, eventually fouls him. For whatever reason, the referee and VAR, for some God-given or whatever it was, decided to not penalize Chalobah and Chelsea. Maybe they just felt bad for us. But in all honesty, I think that should have been one, because if it happened to us on the other side, we'd be saying that's completely what is VAR there for, if not to give those kind of calls. I think Chalobah needs to learn from this, because he did give away a penalty in the last game against Norwich. For how good he has been, he has had some rash moments, and of course that's expected from a young player. But at that stage of the game, if you give away a penalty, you're basically giving Newcastle the belief to see it out for the next 20, 30 minutes. So we get lucky, but I think it's a moment for maybe a coach or a co-player to say, just calm down in those kind of moments. Don't try to be too rash and make a decision that will hurt the team.
Yeah, and I'll bring it to you, Alex, because is this something where Chalobah was doing really, really well in the first part of the season and then had a little bit of injury, and now it's coming back and he's a little rusty and trying to get back up to speed? Or is it more of what Rahul is saying, is that it's just too expected from a young player? They do have those rash moments. They do make those mistakes from time to time.
Yeah, I think it is to a certain degree not something you can just say. You can't just expect him to act with the maturity and the poise of some of the other members of our backline. We're pretty spoiled, I think, to watch the likes of Rudiger and Thiago Silva every week, just looking classy as ever. but I think he will develop. He will learn. He needs to learn. I think there's a quality player there. He's just got to sharpen up some parts of his game. And I'm sure that's the kind of thing Tuchel will be looking at and advising him on, because I agree with Rahul. There's room for improvement. He's a young player. He will hopefully put his head down, keep working hard, and keep improving, because he's got a great future at this club if he makes sure he keeps taking into account the advice of those around him, the coaches, his fellow players, and just keeps developing. But no, I'm not too worried. I do think he needs to certainly take it into account, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, I'll stick with you for a minute. Timo Werner, he's had an amazing career. He's still pretty young at RB Leipzig. He comes to Chelsea, a lot of hype. We've discussed that of his first couple of seasons. He does get into a great opportunity. He quote unquote wins a penalty, but seems to be the story of his Chelsea career. He's offside again. He's always offside. Are we going to see the Timo Werner that we saw at Leipzig that's a goal machine? It's not a service issue now. He's constantly offside in most of his games.
It's certainly an issue, and I think that's somewhere where Chelsea fans have been really frustrated at times. It's difficult to see what the solution is, because at a certain point, as you mentioned, Leipzig was his peak, and it doesn't seem like the Chelsea play style allows him, or maybe the Premier League allows him to reach those peaks that he had in Germany. I really do like him as a player. I think he's got some good qualities. I just don't think he fits the system. And you saw him yesterday during the match. It just, to me, was the perfect example of why you don't start Timo Werner on the left wing. It was a perfect advertisement for Christian Pulisic, or even Hudson-Odoi, in my opinion, someone who's just a little trickier on the ball. They've got the interplay, they've got the passing, they've got a little bit of dribbling to break down a defense that's just a bit tighter, because I remember one specific instance where Tuchel was very frustrated with Werner because we broke out beautifully from possession and the ball just got up to him and he lost it. He just didn't really have the finesse or the mindset or the skill, I don't know, to keep hold of it in that situation. So I think there's a good player in there. I'm just not sure his future lies at Chelsea with the way things have been going in terms of his play time and his struggles to really just adapt to the play style. And I think he still could be absolutely quality at the right team. This probably just isn't going to be a fairy tale that goes in the direction, I think, of Kai Havertz, where you saw the struggle and then growing into it, and now he's in great form and we're seeing his quality and he's adapting to the league and adapting to the tactics. I think this might unfortunately be one that goes the other way.
Rahul, Timo Werner is 26 now. Alex had some very honest words to say about him, that he is a quality player. He's shown his quality in another league, but obviously the story isn't working out at Chelsea and in the Premier League. Keeping in mind that he's 26, do you, as a Chelsea fan, maybe sitting in the board's position, say, try to sell him, try to cash him out? Because typically we loan out these players and they join on the loan army for 4 or 5 years till they ride out their contracts.
No, I think if, obviously forgetting what's going on with the ownership and everything, if right. This was a normal season and we were heading towards the summer, I'd say I think it might be time to refresh for Timo in terms of the squad, in terms of the team, in terms of just going somewhere different and trying something new, because it's not working. And like Alex said, you put him on the left wing because you have Kai Havertz, who's playing out of his skin at striker, and if it's not Kai Havertz, then you have Lukaku, who can play that position. So for him to be third choice in a position that typically is where we wanted him to play, turns into him becoming a squad player filling in the gaps when needed, and that's not who he is, and that's not, I think, who he should be, because he has the potential. We've seen at Leipzig, like you guys said, he can be the main guy. He used to finish goals that you would think he wouldn't finish, and that's one of the reasons why we bought him. Obviously, we don't play to his strengths, and that's one of my complaints again when Lukaku comes on, is we don't play to his strengths either. So maybe if you see Timo in a Liverpool shirt, not saying that that's where he should go, I think maybe he'll do better there because they do exploit the spaces and exploit the pace of their wingers and their attackers. And a team like that, I think, would be a better fit for him. But if we can't bring anyone in this summer and it turns into something where we need bodies and we need players, then Timo can stay, and we know he'll try his best, and that's what we love him for.
He does always put in 100%. So hopefully, whichever way this goes, it'll work out for all parties that are involved. But Alex, Tuchel makes a change and brings on Pulisic. I think you've already been calling for him to start the game better at left wing, but he seems to have come on at left wing back, and we make the switch to a back three again.
Yeah, it's not obviously ideal, but it is what it is. Sees the game out. As always, pretty bright when he's subbed on. Obviously, not in the best position to make a huge impact with the amount of time and position on the pitch. But I think hopefully Tuchel recognizes at this point, having now given Werner a chance on the left wing, having seen Christian Pulisic, who's now scored he's had 9 goals and assists, 7 goals in his last 10 left wing starts. I think surely at this point, Tuchel realizes in my strongest attacking lineup, Christian Pulisic is on the left wing. I don't think that's really too debatable at this point. Now, obviously, the issue of trying to fit Hakim Ziyech and Mason Mount in the squad as well, both of whom can be quite good on their day, makes things a little tough, but I think undeniably our best winger is Christian Pulisic. And I certainly hope and expect to see him start in the Champions League against Lille. But we'll see. I mean, depends, I guess, how confident Tuchel's feeling, but I think that's a game where you want to play him, especially because he scored in the last game against Lille. And that's somewhere I say you just keep playing your best players in their best positions until they stop performing. But as of right now, I think Pulisic and obviously Kai Havertz have both made very good cases for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument. I think both of them, but Pulisic specifically on the left wing, at this point, I don't really see a lot of competition for that position, but Tuchel knows best. So we'll see how that plays out. Rahul, I mean, it's getting into the 88th, 89th minute. It's 0-0. It looks like it's going to be another couple of points dropped where you're going to take 1 point and draw. What happens then? How does this story end?
It ends with a goal, and it ends with something that gets you out of your seat, right? Like you said, your mentality and you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a draw. Newcastle don't seem like they're going to concede here, and we don't seem like we're going to create enough in the last few minutes to get a goal. And out of nowhere, and maybe something we've been asking for, is play that ball sooner and find these runners that make the runs. And I don't know what clicks. Maybe Jorginho was like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna do it this time. But man, that ball, like, I'm gonna bring up Cesc Fabregas, but I think Jorginho deserves the credit himself because he has that ability. We've spoken about it. He can do it. He finally picks up the ball and just pings it. It's not even like a cross or anything. It's just, I'm gonna just lay it easily over to Kai Havertz. And you got to give Kai the credit for making that run. You said we switched to a back three. We did, I think, more in defending, but when we were going attacking, it became a 4-4-2 almost of a sense, because Kai and Lukaku turned into the two people that played in between the 5 defenders, and that's where it came from. Kai Havertz makes a diagonal run, that touch to kill the ball right in his path, and then finish it right away. And I was almost like dozing off because the clocks had changed, and I was like, nothing's going to happen here. And bam, that was 1-0. And I'm like, there we go. That's what this team can do. We just tend to make it difficult.
Look, I'll bring it to you, Alex. When Chelsea signed Kai Havertz a couple of seasons ago, the word that was kind of pushed around was generational talent. And honestly, we've covered Kai Havertz quite a bit here. We were very critical early on. Rahul had asked for some patience because of COVID. You had asked for some patience because of adaptation to the league. I think in the last few games, you've really seen what Kai Havertz brings to Chelsea. But I come back to the word generational talent. That touch to kill the ball and then still have the confidence and presence of mind to just slot it past the goalkeeper. That has to be part of the generational talent that everybody was talking about, right?
Yeah, I don't see, I mean, I said at the time, I don't think there's another player really in our squad who hits that goal and who controls the ball like that and finishes like that. Won't even begin to ask about Timo Werner, who earlier in the exact same game had a ball floated to him and botched the control and gave up what would have been a one-on-one chance against the keeper. We won't talk about Lukaku, who's has some strengths and first touch is not one of them. Even Christian Pulisic, I think, is maybe the next most likely because he is pretty two-footed and he's got some finesse. But I think the way Havertz was just able to cushion it perfectly and then with the same foot just poke it past the keeper was unheard of. I mean, that's exactly what you want from a top class striker. And yeah, he is looking right now like he is worth every cent that we paid for him. So I won't get maybe dragged into the idea of generational just yet, but he is certainly making a better case for that than a lot of other players of his age.
Yeah, look, very, very fair statements there. I think he's definitely maybe even paid for himself twice over at this point with a couple of key goals in the trophies that he's won for us. So enough about Kai Havertz now. Rahul, I'll come back to you. 5 straight wins on the bounce. We seem to be hitting some form. You, Alex, and I have sat here and complained about December blues, and then it rolled into January, and then a lot of uncertainty now. But 5 wins on the bounce is not a bad way to continue the season.
No, absolutely not. And we needed these games and we needed these wins because, like you had said, we'd fallen off the top of the table from first to second to third. And we were, I mean, not to say we're not out of it, but we were in a top 4 battle. And obviously now we're one of the favorites to make it. I think we only need 20 points more this season to guarantee it, which is a good spot to be in. But you never know what happens. So we gotta continue working hard, gotta continue getting these wins. And maybe once we've solidified that 3rd spot, we can focus on FA Cup, Champions League, or simply just having the club Chelsea, because that is one of the concerns. But jokes apart, I think the boys have bounced back, and 5 wins in a row is a great achievement at this point of the season.
Absolutely. And before I get off of you, Rahul, I'll come back to you. You want to talk about the player of the season? Sounds like you're trying to do a poll here.
So yes, I did do a poll. I guess I'm a little ahead of the times, but with everything that's going on, I thought we may change the focus of the topic. So I put up a poll on Twitter. I said Kai Havertz player of the season for Chelsea ? Thiago and Rudy make top 3 for me. Who do you guys think? And 63% people that responded out of about 200 people said Thiago Silva. So I wanted to bring that up to you guys and see what your opinions were. Mendy was a shot, Reece James was a shot, and Kovacic. So who do you guys think? And does Thiago, is he the clear favorite at this point?
Yeah, he's got to be up there for sure. I think people tend to forget as you get older, your body doesn't function as the physical way as it should. But Thiago Silva doesn't make it seem like there's anything wrong with him. We've heard about oxygen chambers and exercising to manage his body better and eating right. And he's probably the perfect example of a prime athlete and how you want to extend your career and make sure not only are you extending the career, because to be honest, we've seen guys that have left and gone to Saudi Arabia, they've gone to China, they've gone to the US, they've gone to other leagues. And no disrespect to any of these leagues, they're probably a step down from some of the top European leagues up there, but they're able to function and have a good career towards the end of their career. But he's one that said, you know what, let me take it to the Premier League. Of all leagues out there, coming from France into the Premier League and doing what he's doing, he's got to be up there. I mean, he really has. Alex, I'll pass it over to you.
I certainly agree. I mean, he's set the bar so high. It's tough, and in a weird way, I think it's good that it's tough to pick a clear player of the season, because at the same time, Reece James, all he's done wrong is have some really unlucky injuries, because whenever he's been on the pitch, he's been phenomenal. So if not for the injuries, I think we'd all be saying Reece James is right up there.
Yeah.
And Havertz, I think, might be a little recency bias just because he's been one of the few in great form in recent weeks. But I do think he's come up massively clutch for us. So it is difficult. I think probably Thiago Silva. I would have to agree. But yeah, Kovacic is another one who has been completely underappreciated for the fact that he's been adding some fantastic passing, dribbling, goals, assists. He's been really, really coming up big. And I think he's easily one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. So probably Thiago Silva, as the poll suggests, but I mean, really, really quite a close one. And Mendy too has been absolutely fantastic. So I'm glad that we have so many players making a case for themselves, so to speak, because it tells us that we're not being completely carried by any one guy, and different people are stepping up at different times, which is what you need at a top club.
Yeah, and if Tony Rudiger signs that contract, then he can be my player of the season as long as he signs. Rahul, I'll pass it back to you. Let's go through the Chelsea women's now.
Yes, so the women's played again on the same day as the men, and they started about an hour before. They're in a hot title race with Arsenal for the WSL title. They played Aston Villa at home and for the most part dominated that game. 22 shots, 58% possession, 509 passes, 75% pass accuracy. So they do what they've been doing in terms of dominating games and being the team that's kind of trying to force the issue. Obviously, they're missing the likes of Fran Kirby, Leopolds, and Eriksson. So there are some big names missing. Leopolds will be out for the rest of the season. We want to congratulate her. She's having a baby. So that's an exciting time for her. But coming back to the game, it seemed like we were letting the title slip in terms of it being in our own hands, given that we have a couple of games on Arsenal. But Sam Kerr steps up in the 94th minute, a ball out from goalie Muskovic into Millie Bright, who's now turned into a center forward. Kind of goes over everyone, lands into Sam Kerr's path, and she, similar to Kai Havertz, takes a touch, sets herself up, and then dinks it over the goalie and makes it 1-0. But what was more iconic was the celebration, because this is not something you tend to see in the women's game. She just takes her shirt off and just swings it around and celebrates, and the bench goes crazy, the players go crazy, and the game ends and Chelsea win it 1-0. And then the men won it right at the end, and it just seemed to be fitting. And like we said in the last episode, the Chelsea spirit continues to go strong, and we want to see that.
Yeah, and one of the previous episodes when Stamford Chidge was on, he had talked about how Sam Kerr was possibly world class. And I think you're seeing that. We've talked a lot of praise about Kai Havertz. Sam Kerr has to be mentioned in the same breath of, she is a little bit older than Kai Havertz. She's 28, but she's in that prime stage now. I think the next 4 or 5 years for her is really critical, because she can really bring Chelsea forward and win more things, especially if you're getting goals like this in the last minute. It's just going to add to the passion and the fuel of the game. So definitely exciting. Anything else you want to wrap up with the women's team?
Just sticking on Sam Kerr, she's now scored 50 goals in 79 appearances. So just pointing to your what you were saying, the numbers back it up. And for the longest time, everyone said, why are we signing Sam Kerr? We've got Kirby, we've got Beth England. But in a team that's got ambitions like Chelsea, we want the best players, and she's certainly up there. So like I said, we still have 2 games in hand over Arsenal, and we sit in second. So it's still in our hands. If we win both games, we go top. And that next game is coming on Wednesday night. So once again, the men and the women's team will be playing on the same night, and hopefully we'll be able to match the results and continue winning.
And hopefully we get goals a little bit earlier, so we're not waiting for those heart attacks towards the end. But no, that's great news. Let's move on and talk about some other things outside of Chelsea, some other Premier League games that are going on. So we'll bring it back to the men's side again. We'll talk about Leeds versus Norwich. I want to talk about Leeds for a few minutes, Alex. It's Jesse March coming back in since Bielsa has been graciously asked to leave. He didn't do so well in his first game, but he did endear himself to the Premier League fans in stating that, there's a lot of stigma around American coaches or American footballers coming to the Premier League and calling it soccer, but he has called it football his whole life. He understands the culture. He grew up in a footballing household. He gets his first win against Norwich here. Any words you can share with us on Jesse March?
Yeah, it was a good late win, very dramatic. Frankly, as a Chelsea fan, there aren't too many things that could make me happy to celebrate Leeds' success, but that was one of them. They were playing a good game, and they could not finish for the life of them. They had 1 goal, but they were going, as Rafinha was hitting bar down. They kept hitting the woodwork. They were missing open nets. And then the commentators kept saying, are they going to be punished for this? And then they were in the 91st minute with just a simple goal conceded. But then I believe in the 94th minute or right about then, they scored a second goal to win the game 2-1. The celebrations were crazy. Jesse Marsch was obviously very, very pleased. And I think it's a very good sign, because you do want to see American coaches proving that they can compete on the biggest stages. And I think definitely I'll certainly personally be rooting for his success. Obviously not against Chelsea, but in general, I do hope he does well, and I hope he improves the sort of stigma, as he himself admitted, against Americans in managerial positions and in general in the sport. So yeah, I think that's great news for the future too of the U.S. men's national team, because if we can start producing top coaches, we've seen that we're now starting to produce some top players, the likes of Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, Serginho Dest, et cetera, et cetera. So if we can get the coaching to catch up and fill that gap, I think we'll be in a really strong place as a nation and be able to cement ourselves on the global stage.
Yeah, definitely a bright future for the United States overall. Rahul, sticking with United, it seems like Ronaldo is back, and Ronaldo's back on the score sheet. What can you share with us on that front?
Yeah, Ronaldo scoring a hat-trick against Antonio Conte's Spurs. Battle for top four this game was, and not that one of them has solidified it, but United winning it puts them hopefully closer to that, even though I think Arsenal, when we get to them, seem to be the ones that leading the charge. But United getting the win after losing in the derby last weekend. Ronaldo's show, really. I don't think United played particularly well, but Ronaldo doing what he does at the age of 37, 38. You got to give credit to that man. But that first goal, I think Lloris could have done better. Not to take away anything from Ronaldo, but I just think, I look at it, I think he's diving, and if he goes a little bit earlier, or maybe puts her arm over, not that I'm an expert, I think he can save that. But again, you look at Spurs, right? They one game win, one game lose, one game win, one game lose, and they've got to end that if they want any chance of having a say in this top four race. So Spurs and Conte seem to be going along okay for now, but I don't know if that will continue if they end up in like the Conference League.
Yeah, and coming back to Ronaldo for just a minute, he was supposedly injured in the last game, and here he comes back to bag a hat trick. So interesting things going on in United, but with Spurs, they're doing Spur things.
He just wanted to take a trip to Portugal because he knew that City game was going to be tough. So comes back and does the business against Spurs.
Interesting indeed. Alex, I'll come to you. Liverpool beat Brighton 2-0. Seems like business as usual, and they're just chugging along. Yeah,
they're definitely at this point right up there, making their own case and saying, don't forget about us. A lot of people sort of wrote the preliminary lines on the trophy for City already earlier in the season, and Liverpool are showing that they're not going down without a fight. So exciting times for sure.
Absolutely. I'm spending a little bit of time on Liverpool, but Rahul, I'm coming back to talk about Everton, the other side of the Merseyside. Wolves beat them 1-0. And Everton had problems, starting early on the season until Frank Lampard got there. And I want to talk a little bit about Frank Lampard. He's our very own Chelsea through and through. But it's not looking good for Everton and for Frank Lampard particularly.
It's not. And I'm concerned about him more than Everton. Not that I don't care about them. Everton have been a household name in the Premier League, but you look at Frank Lampard, he went in there maybe 2 months ago at this point, and everything you would have thought would point towards a bounce back and them getting some points in that Spurs game last week, and then followed up against Wolves. Obviously, Wolves are a difficult team to break down, but on the back of Spurs 5-0, which was hard to watch because Everton looked like they had no idea how to play the game, and then they lose here. It's running out of time for them. I know they have a bunch of games in hand, and Frank's going to do everything he can, but you look at Everton and you look at the club and the history that they've got. They're building a new stadium. They're not going to want to do that in the Championship. And so if they lose, like they have a huge game against Newcastle on Thursday night. If they lose that, I think the board and the club may make a decision, which is going to be painful to watch.
Yeah, like you said, he does have 3 games in hand. So, I mean, those 3 must be must-wins. just so he can get himself out of danger there. But hopefully he can get through this, and we'll see Frank Lampard in the Premier League for another season. But I'll come into Alex's favorite banter team, and that's Arsenal. And Arsenal beat his other favorite banter team, which is Leicester, 2-0. Alex, what can you tell us about this game?
Certainly, Arsenal are looking up. Their form is quite good in the Premier League. I think I don't know if it's 8 of their last 10 that they've won. I think I don't know if, I don't have the exact numbers, but they're on quite a good streak. They're racking up the wins in the Prem, and I think they've certainly established themselves as favorites for that 4th place position. And obviously Chelsea is not home free yet. Theoretically, Arsenal could still challenge for 3rd. I think it's likely that we'll see Chelsea hopefully stay in 3rd at least, and then Arsenal probably looking like they're going to grab that 4th place spot because of how they're above United and still have a couple games in hand on them. You do have to applaud them for turning around what started as a very tough season. But I think they're still a long way off becoming a truly top elite club. But this is the first step, just getting those Champions League finishes, getting a bit of squad chemistry, noting your consistent performers, finding that talented core to build around. This is the first step in building up into becoming a truly top class side. So credit to them, I suppose. And I am at least glad to see the confirmation of my own ball knowledge, because I've said many times that I was a Martin Odegaard fan, and now he's being praised quite highly all across social media by really all fan bases, saying, wow, what a talent he is. 30 million was a steal. And that's one player I don't know if it was with you guys that I think it might've been with some other friends that I was doing a Premier League mock draft where we had to build squads of Premier League players, and I picked him and said I rated him. So +1 point for the holistic ball knowledge, but unfortunately that also comes in the favor of Arsenal.
Yeah, well said. I mean, Martin Odegaard for 30 million, I think, was a really, really good steal for Arsenal. In this day and age, you don't get a young player. Rahul, I see you winking and grimacing there. I'm not going to get into that debate for today, but I will talk about Palace and City, and Palace, another team that we had not pipped to do so well, hold City to a draw.
Yeah, I mean, and they beat them earlier this season. So City scored no goals against them. Although they sit in 11th, that's the beauty of this league, is anybody can come up against anyone, even if it's the best team in the league so far, and hold them to a draw. And in other scenarios, could have quite easily beaten them 1-0 or 2-0. So credit to Palace, credit to Patrick Vieira, who has had a long way back into the Premier League as a manager, but he's proving that he's learned a lot along the way and deserves to be here. And I'm sure he's being celebrated and lauded in the red half of Merseyside, because we clearly have a title race here. And City, really, I didn't expect it to come down to being this close, but City seem to be drinking what Spurs have been having for 30 plus years, which is just bottling it.
And they went on a very good run. But before we talk about the title race for a second, I'll bring Alex in to get his thoughts. We'll go through the table really quickly. At the top, Manchester City with 70 points, Liverpool in second with 66 points, but they do have a game in hand and they have to play Manchester City. So I think that's where you're alluding to a title race, Rahul. It's going to get interesting. Chelsea in third with 59 points. They also have a game in hand behind Manchester City. Arsenal in fourth with 51 points, but they have 3 games in hand. So it gets very, very interesting as time goes on. An honorable mention to Manchester United, who are sitting in fifth with no games in hand, but do have 50 points. And I'll come down to the bottom of the table, but this is a really interesting table at the bottom. Norwich City with 17 points, Burnley with 21 points, but do have a couple of games in hand, Watford with 22 points. And then right above them is Everton with 22 points as well, but they have 3 games in hand. So this is going to be interesting as we get closer towards the end of the season, but hopefully while we play catch up here, the table structure should start to form out a little more seriously. Alex, do we have a title race in hand right now?
Absolutely. I mean, technically Liverpool have it fully in their power to win the league if they win every single game from here on out, because they still do need to play City. So in that way, oddly enough, both Liverpool and Manchester City have it fully in their destiny is in their own hands, you could say. Chelsea, obviously, to be anywhere near that conversation would require a couple key points being dropped in games from both contenders. So I don't want to put us in that conversation yet. But I guess we just have to see how Pep and Klopp manage their sides from here on out, because Chelsea also have that game in hand on Manchester City. If we win that, I think we're what, 8 points behind them. So no easy feat, but it's never over till it's over. So I'm certainly glad it's exciting, though I don't know. It's very difficult picking the lesser of two evils between City and Liverpool winning the title. I think that would make City pass us on the Premier League title count, but it would also make Liverpool believe that they actually have a squad that's going to compete for multiple years to come, and they aren't going to be just finished when Jurgen Klopp leaves. So I don't like either of them winning it. Obviously, my dream world is that after all this drama, Chelsea sneak across the finish line and manage to squeeze an absolutely horrendous 1-goal shocker of a win with like 37 controversial VAR calls on the final day, and absolutely enraged the entirety of the UK. But that's looking a little far-fetched. So for right now, I guess I'll just hope both teams lose as many games as possible, and we'll see what happens.
Rahul, in an ideal world, Alex's Chelsea is going to make it and sneak into winning the Premier League. In your world, there's 9 games and 10 games respectively for Manchester City and Liverpool. And as Alex has alluded to win the Premier League, technically you need to go on a straight run, 9 and 10 games respectively. Is that doable for each of these sides?
Oh, absolutely. You've seen it from a few seasons ago where they went neck to neck right up until the end, and City just won it by a point. But from what I'm hearing, and I don't know why I did this, but I jumped onto a Liverpool fans live, IG live after the City game, and they were we're going to win 4 trophies. We've got the squad. We've got the best manager. We've got the best right back, goalie. Literally every position you can name, they said they had the best player. And this is before they even in top spot. So if I had to pick a lesser of the evil, I would 100% pick City. In Alex's world, I would jump right into it too with my VR glasses and virtual reality, and hopefully just Chelsea come out of nowhere. But I think we've got a bigger problem with Arsenal breathing down our neck. So I would rather us just clear away from them. And that brings me to the other picking between two evils is, who do I pick this week between Liverpool and Arsenal to win the game? So for us, it's a weird situation to be in because we've already got all this stuff going on the outside. And now we've got to watch one of these 3 teams in terms of Liverpool and City, and then Arsenal coming down for us. Hopefully it's something that works out in our favor. But if I had to pick one, it's got to be City, because with their 2 or 3 fans, I can bear them bantering instead of Liverpool's 1,000 fans that are gonna. And you got to remember, the last time they won it, they had no fans in the stadium. So this time around, they were talking about booking hotels for parades, and dude, it was insane. I don't know why I did this, but I'm waiting. If this goes in City's favor, I'm going to go jump onto that live again and pull some Alex level banter.
maybe the Premier Chelsea will host a live where you can banter Liverpool for missing out on the Premier League. But no, that covers the Premier League for now. I mean, again, guys, it's getting into a photo finish, both at the top of the table and the bottom of the table. So either way, exciting. My 2 thoughts or 2 cents here. I wouldn't mind Liverpool beating Arsenal just to keep Arsenal off of us. Finishing in 3rd is always better for me than finishing in 4th and fighting that scrap to get in there. So just my 2 thoughts there. Let's talk about Champions League. We're going back into the Champions League. We played Lille last. We won 2-0 in the first leg. And the question now is, how are we going to get to Lille? Are we going to get there by plane? Are we going to get there by train? Are we going to get there by bus? But before this segment started, I think Alex said we're going to get there in N'Golo Kante's Mini Cooper, right, Alex?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. And I just wanted to add to my end of season fantasy that I'd ideally like to see an N'Golo Kante hand of God Maradona style goal to win us the title on the last day. So blatantly palming the ball across the line, but maybe the VAR cameras are turned off and we see Roman Abramovich sneaking away with wire cutters after the game. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah, I do think maybe we'll have to call upon N'Golo to drive us if nothing else crops up.
And for anyone listening, I guess it's to the reference, Rahul, that the Premier Chelsea posted of Tuchel's interview earlier today or earlier yesterday with some of the struggles that Chelsea are going through financially now with all the assets frozen, whether or not we'd be able to afford a plane trip up to Lille. And he said some classy things. I'll turn it over to you to share with us what he said exactly.
Yeah, I think that the question caught him by surprise a little bit, but his response was classy as ever, and he's just a chill guy. I mean, if you think about everything that's going on, for a lot of other managers, they would have caved in and become a little more defensive. He's honest. He gives the way he thinks it is, and he says, if we can't get there by plane, we'll go by train. If it's not train, if it's a bus, if it's not a bus, I'll drive a 7-seater, but we will be there. And if you listen to the reasoning about it, he goes, 20 or 30 years, if you had given me an opportunity to be at a Champions League game as a manager, I would have done anything. And the fact that I have another opportunity to go and do this with Chelsea or just as a manager, I'm going to do it. And it doesn't matter how we get there. Obviously, we're going to get there by plane because this was booked before all of the sanctions and everything came our way. But it just shows you where his head's at, and he's just taking it day by day, taking it till the end of the season. And hopefully he stays, because out of everything, he has been one of the shining lights. If you think about this whole season, we started off with the injuries earlier this season to Reece and Chilwell. We've had the Lukaku interview. We've had this whole thing with Roman, and he's just kept it real and been honest. And I can't say enough about him and praise him enough. And I know you'll come back and say you didn't want him in the first place. But I'm fully on the Tuchel train, bus, car, whatever, cycle, scooter. And he's going to go down as one of the best managers in terms of not only the trophies, but also the character and the passion he has for the game.
Yeah, I think that's something I wanted to bring Alex into on that conversation, which is the passion. Alex, he talks about if you had offered him this opportunity as a manager 20 years ago to make it to a Champions League game, he would have done anything to get there. But we're not sitting 20 years ago. Fast forward to 2022. Tuchel is a well-established manager. He is one of the world's best. I'm not trying to just praise him because he's a Chelsea guy. We've seen what he's achieved with PSG and more recently with us, obviously. But it's nice to see the passion that he has still today with him to say, heck, I'll drive the car. I don't have a problem. I'll sit behind the 7-seater and take some of my players and we'll go. It's almost refreshing. And like Rahul said, it's a shining light to have him during tough times because he just seems to radiate positivity and he just wants to play football.
Yeah, we are immensely lucky to have Thomas Tuchel at this club. I think if you gave him the same resources that Pep has been given, he would come out on top of Pep. There's my hot take. I think if you gave him the same time to establish his system with player transfers he wants as Klopp at Liverpool, I don't think there would be a debate there. I think Tuchel has every tool to be the world's best manager. And unfortunately, there's been this little setback with all the Chelsea drama going on and the sanctions and the ownership and whatnot. But you've got to say how lucky we are for having him during this time, because it really is something we take for granted. I think the fact that he never says a word wrong to the media. He never throws his players under the bus, but at the same time, he's honest. He's quite literally, I mean, I just haven't seen a flaw, and that's something that's impressive. I guess his only flaw, according to the British media, is that he celebrated our late winner against Newcastle because there were articles written, which is a little odd to me, considering I remember when Jurgen Klopp ran the length of the pitch onto the field after a late winner versus Everton. They praised his passion, and he just couldn't control his insatiable passion for the club and for victory. And then Tuchel does a couple fist pumps after a 90th minute winner, and it's disgusting and uncalled for. So, I think it's absolutely beautiful having a manager who won't give the media any sound bites that they're looking for, won't say anything negative, never seems perturbed, never lets things get him down, and never really reflects the negativity. He's, as you guys have mentioned, just really a positive force at this club. So, man, I hope we have him for many, 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 many years. And whoever does end up coming in and owning this club, I hope sees his value and locks him down for the very long term.
Yeah, and it's good that you say he's never given the media any sound bites, but the bites that he does give, I personally believe that he believes that in his heart, that if there was no way to get to Lille, he would drive a car. That's the way he approaches a conversation, is the way he makes me feel as a fan, is that he isn't just saying it for face value. He truly believes that if he needs to drive a car, he's going to get behind the wheel and drive us to France. Granted, it's not the longest drive out there, but the fact that he's willing to do it at the point in his career and the stature that he's achieved, to me, speaks volumes. But enough praise about Tuchel. We'll skip over the part that Rahul didn't want him to join Chelsea here and jump right into the Champions League. Rahul, why don't you take us through the starting 11?
Yeah, so it's an away game. We come into it with the 2-0 win, no away goals. Obviously, away goals don't count, I beg your pardon. Lille sit in sixth in Ligue 1, drew their last game, which was on Friday night, so they've had a few days to prepare against Saint Etienne 0-0. And I think for us, we revert back to the familiar back three, wing back setup, as long as we have players fit. So I think that's the caveat here. But Mendy, Chalobah, Thiago Silva, who was rested, comes back in. Rudiger continues. I think Azpilicueta may come back in. It is the right wing back. Kante, Kovacic, Saul. Even though Alonso was on the bench, he has not played for a few games. So maybe Saul starts, but Alonso could come in too. And then I think Mount, Kai, and Pulisic as the front three. And not trying to jinx it or anything, but Reece may be on the bench. So that might be another shining light, but it may also come too soon for him. So I think it'll just depend on how it goes the next couple of days.
Yeah, so strong lineup, back to the back three again. Forgive the word twice. Alex, any changes, or do you agree with this starting lineup?
I definitely agree. I think Pulisic should start. He was ill in the last game, 2 games ago, got used as a sub against Newcastle. I think this is a great chance to give him another start against opposition he's already scored against just a week or 2 ago, and also keep some of that front three chemistry going. I think if Kai is fit to start and not feeling any fatigue, I think he should get some minutes. Now, maybe you end up seeing Lukaku because you want to conserve Kai Havertz for some of these crucial end of the season games, but I want to see us really develop chemistry. So definitely, I think the Pulisic Havertz mount front three is probably our strongest. Ziyech also needs to be given some credit. I think it wouldn't be unheard of for him to start, but he does tend to do a little better in a 4-3-3.
Yeah, like you said, good call there for Kai Havertz to get that chemistry going. And he's in red hot form. So if he can continue to get on the score sheet and perform the way he is, I think it's just going to keep his confidence in the rest of Chelsea going. Rahul, scoreline from you, sir? Rahul, can you please give us a scoreline?
Yes, sorry. I'm going to say a 1-1, but I could easily see us nicking it maybe 3-1 too. So I'll go with 3-1.
Okay, the positivity continues. Alex, what's the prediction from you, sir?
I'm hoping a continued clean sheet. So maybe a 2-0 from me. I think we can do it again, and hopefully that would just not have us too nervous, especially after our first leg win.
Yep, for sure. I'm going to go for 2-1. I think it will be an easy game, but Lille need 1 goal to get their supporters a little bit excited that they showed up to the stadium. So 2-1 for me, and hopefully that means we progress with a 4-1 win on aggregate. But before we wrap up today, let's go through and talk about some other interesting games that are happening in and around us. Rahul, I'll come to you first. Atletico Madrid versus Manchester United.
Yeah, good game. I think they drew 1-1 in the first leg. So all to play for. And United aren't in the best form. I know they beat Spurs, but Atletico Madrid obviously have had their issues too. But I think from a selfish perspective, I'd like to see Atletico go through just so that we don't have to hear about United in the Champions League, and probably won't have to for another year or so. So Atletico for me.
Okay. Alex, Ajax versus Benfica. A lot has been made about the Ajax coach, but this is a good game for him to move forward into the next round as well.
Yeah, I think definitely Ajax are probably your favorites here, and it's not going to be one I think that concerns us either way necessarily. I think probably most Chelsea fans believe that on our day we could take either of those teams. So not too concerned there, but maybe hopefully some good entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. Raul, you can do Juventus versus Villarreal and then maybe wrap us up for the episode.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look up what the score from the first leg was. So if you give me just a second, it was 1-1. So
1-1,
another finely poised game. And Juventus at home, so you'd expect them to come through, but Villarreal under Unai Emery seemed to find a way to win games, at least in Europe. So it'll be interesting. Maybe one of these goes to not our game. Maybe one of the other three goes to penalties, and we get a little bit of excitement. But I'll go with Juventus in that one, and that will set up the next round, which is the quarterfinals, pretty well with some of the teams that won last week, and then 4 teams from here, and hopefully we'll be in that pot and can play Benfica next. Yes, I picked Benfica from the other game. But that wraps it up, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Please continue to subscribe, like, and follow us. It's at the Premier Chels on all major podcast providers and Instagram. And on Twitter, it's at Premier Chels. And as always, send us your feedback. And we will be back with the new episode later this week. But until then, stay safe and up the Chels.